Hello and welcome. I'm an AI voice reading an AI-generated script. Let's talk about nonprofit AI. Generative artificial intelligence will inevitably revolutionize nonprofit work. In particular, sophisticated large language models, which are trained on vast amounts of text data, can generate conversational, human-like responses. Prompting these chatbots to support nonprofit workflows can save organizational leaders time, energy, and funding. The journey of generative AI began in the mid-20th century, with the first chatbot being introduced in the 1960s. AI has gained significant momentum in the last decade with advancements in how computers can learn and process large amounts of information. In the past year, AI adoption has accelerated exponentially as more tools become more accessible and integrated into traditional tools for work. Nonprofit leaders can leverage these AI tools to enhance daily productivity by automating routine internal tasks and enhancing external communications. This not only saves time, but also allows teams to focus more time on mission-critical strategic initiatives that drive their mission forward. By ethically harnessing the power of large language models, organizations can find responsible, yet innovative ways to engage with their communities, personalize outreach efforts, and ultimately achieve their goals more effectively. Embracing AI is no longer a curiosity, it's a necessity for modern nonprofit leadership.
Here's a quick overview of the evening. First, we'll start with some general grounding around what artificial intelligence for nonprofits means. Then we'll talk about specifically the potential of how it could impact our respective work with day-to-day productivity. And then we'll look at some real-life use cases, hearing from our panel and then trying a few examples ourselves so that hopefully you can leave here ready to try something new in your work, aided by AI. Let me start by telling you a little bit about my first experience with AI. Last Christmas, I was interested in using one of the image generation tools to create a holiday card. We just had a new baby. It would be her first Christmas, and we often send out a card to our family and friends. So in my mind, I had the vision to create a card that had a zoomed up visual of a Christmas tree with a few ornaments, each of which have our names, and a small little child's hand would be adding a new bulb to the tree with her name. So in my first attempt, I explained this concept as clear as I could. I was specific about the small hand adding the third bulb, but you see here, it only added 2 bulbs, and the names are spelled wrong. So I went to revise it, wanted to stress that there should be 3 bulbs with the names spelt correctly. Yet here you see on the second attempt, July is the new bulb. That is right, but it spelled my wife's name's wrong. And you notice for some reason there's a little baby on the bulb. So again, I corrected it, and this time the hand looks more like a baby's hand. The names are almost spelled right, but instead, strangely, the baby's hand is holding a smaller baby. So then we revise it again. The hand looks really good this time, but for some reason it added extra text above the names, and my name is still spelled incorrectly. Then things got even stranger, where I encouraged it to change up the style a little bit, but instead of just changing the stylizing of the image, it also seemed to add some sort of family with an animal-human hybrid. So at that point, I gave up, and I just took the picture by hand myself. Now, from my experience, what I realized was, one, these tools have come a long way in just a few months, and so they're much better at understanding prompts, and their spelling is way better. But more importantly, what I realized is that myself as a human prompting these tools has come a long way in my understanding of how to create a really clear prompt, and being comfortable that the first time isn't always going to be perfect, and then it's a constant iteration of me checking and offering feedback to the system. Now, when we think about ourselves as nonprofit leaders, why is this important? Well, Oprah, in an ABC News special that's available on Hulu, said it better than I can. She said, the stakes are too high for anyone to sit this out. And I think that's really important and true for nonprofit practitioners because AI is evolving so rapidly, and we know there's implicit bias in the models, and we know there are good things and potentially nefarious things that can be done with these tools in the future. And so it's important that at these early stages, we understand their potential and we're trying ways to use them that are ethical, responsible, and conscious of the communities that we're working with so that we can influence how they evolve, guardrails that are put in place, and ultimately understand what we think is fair and the right way to use these tools within our spaces. So with that in mind, we hope you leave with some really concrete things. But let's begin with a little bit of grounding around what AI is and it is not. First, AI is nothing new. It's been around for decades. It's been a staple motif in many of my favorite TV shows and movies. But just in recent years has it become commercially available at a really low cost for us to experiment with in a variety of ways. While AI isn't new, it is a tool. It's not intended to replace humans. We want it to enhance our capabilities and solve more complex problems in shorter amounts of time. Like any tool, it has to be used responsibly with care. And we should think of it as more of an assistant that can help us do our work more quickly, not as a replacement for emotional intelligence or human decision making. You probably know that AI is not perfect. My Christmas card is a great example that things don't always go the way you intend when you use these tools. The concept of hallucinating is when an AI model presents an answer that it believes to be true, but in fact it has made up information or a source and presents it as accurate. So it's important that we always check the accuracy of the output and ultimately make it our own. And last but certainly not least, whether we like it or not, AI is here and it's here to stay. It's going to constantly evolve every day. So let's talk about how we can learn with it and alongside of it. The biggest thing we hope you leave with is an investment in trying things with AI. I recently had dinner with an attorney friend, and he was talking about how many historic case briefings he has to read to get context into the current trials that he has before him. My wheel started turning, as with many situations, where I thought, well, hey, why don't you use an AI chatbot next time you're digging into hundreds of past case files as a way to quickly digest and synthesize the. Can you think of an example in your day-to-day work, something that might be totally novel, new task to you, and you don't necessarily know where to start? Well, that might be an interesting opportunity to try it with AI. Give the bot several pieces of information from the web or PDFs and start asking it questions about what you were initially thinking and wondering about. Before we bring up our panel, we want to share a few of the common mindsets that I've heard from talking to each of them. When using artificial intelligence, we encourage nonprofit leaders to be, one, open. These people are embracing the tool as an innovative opportunity to try new things, and we recognize that it's constantly growing and changing. The second is these leaders are ethical when they're using AI. They're considering the implications of using it to advance community-driven work and trust their instincts about when information is appropriate and inappropriate to share with the AI. The third is curious. We're constantly excited about the advancements and experimenting with these new tools. And last but certainly not least, the process is iterative. These leaders are refining their prompts improving their prompt engineering skills, and constantly finding better and better results as they get more acquainted with the bot and the bots get more acquainted with them. Now, after all this, you might be wondering, what exactly are people using AI to help them do within the nonprofit space? Well, within my team at Amplified Digital's world, we think about communications and marketing, and we've been identifying use cases within these 6 categories. Brainstorming is all about coming up with new ideas. This could be anything from presenting a variety of concepts for your next gala theme to what's a new content idea for the election period coming up. The research category is about getting AI to assist in your digesting information, particularly large sets of information. So you might be working with a new set of students and you want to learn more about the neighborhood from which they come from. You might ask the bot to do some preliminary research on the demographics of that community. The third is organizing information. So again, you might have a large set of information and you need to sort it in interesting ways. Something that you could probably do in a spreadsheet, but it might take you a decent amount of time. So getting a chat bot to help you do that analysis and organization more quickly might save you a ton of time. The next is create, and this one's all about generating new writing or visuals or video. This is what we've heard a lot about in other common representations of how these tools are currently being used, and we imagine that you've all tried in some form talking to a chatbot and asking it to write something for you. The next is improving. So this is all about giving it something you've already drafted and asking it for input. It can be a great proofreader, but it can also be a thought partner in how can you better convey your message, or how do you tweak a message for a slightly different audience. And last is analyze. This is about looking at data, for example, from one of your marketing platforms, such as a social media site. Maybe you look at the past year's worth of posts you put out there and ask the bot to help you understand which posts have been most successful and why. These are just a few of many, many use cases in the nonprofit space. And with that, we'll hear about a few other real-world examples. I'm excited now to introduce our panelists.
Yes, good evening. Thank you all so much for coming. All right, let me kick this off. I'm just going to give a couple of seconds for the people who are sitting down to get settled. Once again, thank you all so much for coming. I've seen so many familiar faces and also an exciting number of unfamiliar faces. So originally, if it was all familiar faces, I was going to keep the intro to about 10 seconds and then kick it off. But I think I'm going to have to go for a longer introduction here just to touch base with all of those people that are new to us. So hi, welcome. My name is Shell, and I am the Administrative Director for Leadership Fellows New York. This is our logo right there next to me. It's pretty cool. We are a leadership development program funded by the New York Community Trust in cooperation with the Center for Nonprofit Strategy at the Austin W. Marks School of Baruch College. The fact that I can say that without flinching proves that I have worked here for way too long. But anyway, if you are unfamiliar with us, I encourage you to check out our website and become familiar with us. How many in the audience are former fellows of ours? Woo! Woo! Yeah, give it up for the former fellows. Hell yeah. And how many came from the Center for Nonprofit Strategies website? How many are from the nonprofit community in general? Not from. All right. Okay, so I am very excited to get to meet all of you. Do we need extra chairs in the back there? Couple more. Okay. Yeah, there's 2 chairs up there. I was like sitting in one, but you can take it. Yes. Of course. Please get settled. Thank you all so much for coming. So, let me see. Is there anything else I was supposed to do? Oh, all right, let's move into it. I know you're all here for this panel discussion on nonprofit AI. I'm very excited to get into our program today. Jamie Loney, who is my friend and colleague and many other things, planned a good deal of this. He has like a dozen years of experience in nonprofit communications and everything else. He was a teacher before he started working in nonprofit communications. And so he's gonna kick us off with a couple of agenda slides here. We're gonna run through it real quick. I'm gonna have a couple last minute remarks, and then we're gonna bring our panelists up to sit and talk. All right, sound good?
Yes. Cool. Thank you, Shel. All right, good evening, everybody. I'm really excited for this conversation. I actually made a vision board in December of last year where I was like, I'm gonna co-host one of the leadership conversations with Shel and Michael and Janae and the team. So I'm excited to see many of your faces. Some of you I recognize as a faculty member of the Leadership Fellows New York program. And as Shel mentioned, I spend most of my time working with nonprofits to help them tell their stories online. I've always been really interested in emerging technology, and there's no doubt that artificial intelligence is changing the way we work. And so I'm really excited to not only share some of my own perspective over the past year of my team and I's learning, but also hear from some of your fellows, as well as later in the evening, giving you all a chance to share with one another about some of your own experiences. So I'm really optimistic that after tonight, you'll leave with a little bit new context and interest in how AI can help us do our work more efficiently, but more importantly, how can we do this in an ethical and responsible way that is supportive of the communities that our organizations serve. You'll hear from several nonprofit leaders who are using it in their day-to-day, and they're going to tell you literally how they do it and how they got to the point of using it more frequently in an actually helpful way. And then for those of you here live tonight, we're going to have a chance to break into small groups and try a few different ways of experimenting with AI. So I'm going to pass it back to Shel for a moment just to share some reflections and some considerations that we can have ahead of our conversation.
Right, so just one, couple of thoughts to think about before we bring our panelists up. As Jamie mentioned, AI is a tool and we want to use it responsibly. So I do want to take a couple of minutes just to acknowledge the fact that there are some, and what I would describe essentially as like anti-AI sentiments. And people who take the position that we shouldn't be using AI are taking it out of reasons that matter to them. I would broadly categorize these into two buckets. One is the ethical considerations and the other is environmental considerations. There are some people who feel that the amount of electricity and energy that is going into maintaining these huge AI servers is detrimental to the environment. So there is that kind of argument that's going around that like using AI is contributing to environmental decline. There's also the ethical considerations. All of these AI tools are trained on existing data. So I believe like one very, very early version of one of these tools, it might have been OpenAI or something else, but I was it was trained on like the Enron emails, right? That's fairly okay in some senses because that was already in the public domain. But there's also, these generative AI tools are being built on artwork that is in the public domain, or people are, we're getting to a point where you can theoretically create videos that are using like actors' faces, or you can start imitating voices of people that you know. And as generative AI technology develops, obviously it's important to be using these tools in a way that is ethical, because it's not good to be using AI in a way that values, improves productivity, but at the cost of devaluing the people who are producing things for you. So just to acknowledge that, right? And also to say essentially that if you do, some kind of AI initiative at your organizations, that you are listening to your constituents responsibly, and acknowledging if they have concerns around the use of AI. So that being said, everybody who's here, I think, is already interested in the topic. So if I could please ask our panelists to come join us on the stage. And give them a warm welcome.
All right, as they are coming to join us. We've had a few conversations prior to tonight thinking about what does it mean to adopt AI in the ways that we're alluding to, and so I'm excited to introduce our three panelists. From my right, we have Victoria Lee from Welcome to Chinatown. She is the executive director and co-founder here, and also enough to lend us the space for this evening. Beside Vic is Zach Phillips. He's a senior program manager at Promise Project. And on the far right, my far right, is Cesar Ventura Tapia. He is a program manager at the Fund for the City of New York. All right, so I'm gonna give each of our panelists an opportunity to tell us a little bit about themselves. We'll start with Cesar. Cesar, tell us a little bit about who you are, what does you and your organization do, and then just give us a hint into what interests you about AI personally.
Hi everyone, welcome. Again, my name is Cesar Ventura Tapia. I am the program manager at Fund for the City of New York. We are a fiscal sponsor nonprofit organization of other nonprofits. So we have over 90 partner organizations. In terms of my role there, I actually oversee 3 different programs: the Sloan Public Service Awards, the Sloan Award for Excellence in Teaching, and the Community Planning Fellowship Program. In terms of AI, Jamie, question, the slide that shows the for-profit, nonprofit slide, you wanna go back to that? So I found this slide very interesting because if you take a look, right, the nonprofit sector is leading now in the usage of AI, right? 2 years ago, this wasn't the case. It was for-profit. So one of the things that I would say back in 2022, when ChatGPT was first released, ChatGPT 3, November 30th, 2022, actually 4 days after my birthday, it was a huge buzz on ChatGPT and what it was doing, right? Image generation, text completion, all of that. I said, you know what? I need to know exactly what it's doing. And then in my line of work, we were not using it. So I said, who is using it? And I realized it was the for-profit organizations that were using it, right? This was, again, mostly around product, right? How do we take reviews of different, users, and how do we incorporate that into really learning about and make decisions around that? And then I asked, we don't sell a product, right? We provide a service to underserved communities. So then how do we now, use AI, empower organizations to really get to a place where we can create equity, right? So that's where my interest began, right? And then I saw that we were all learning how to use the text completion, images, but then a lot of us were just understanding the what and not the how, right? So then what I decided to do with my professional development program is actually I took a course, a 6-month course on just generative AI for business, right? And my goal was actually to talk about the nonprofit sector in the for-profit sector, right? So that's where my interest came from. I could tell you more about that later on, but I'm gonna pass it on to Zach. So,
Yeah, same question, Zach. Tell us who you are and what interests you in AI.
Sure, so I'm Zach Phillips, the Senior Program Manager for Promise Project. We are a small nonprofit here in New York City, located in Washington Heights, that serves marginalized communities and children with learning disabilities. We have a medical clinic housed at New York Presbyterian and Columbia University Medical Center that provides neuropsych evaluations and then parent advocacy and support to ensure that all children who are seen by our program get the services they need to learn in schools. And we have the medical clinic, which is about 16 staff. And then we have an admin staff. We're actually one of the partner programs that's for the City of New York. So thankfully, I don't have to do all of the accounting and all of the HR. But we're a small team of 3 that do basically everything else. So I was intrigued because I have multiple roles that I have to do about where I could find some efficiencies in my day-to-day work that can alleviate some of the pain points of doing prospect researching or idea generation, brainstorming. and figure out how I could incorporate AI into that. I've taken a couple classes, not a 6-month course, but a couple trainings. My first introduction was DALL-E as well. It was me and some friends who were playing a game where someone would secretly put in a prompt and then everyone would see the images and try and guess what the prompt was, which was a fun way to kind of explore it. But I'm just doing this because I'm curious in how it can be helpful. I don't think I'm a deep believer that it can fix everything, but I am a believer that it can provide some assistance and some tools to make my day-to-day work easier.
All right, Vic, tell us the same, please, a little bit about yourself, this organization, this beautiful space we're in, and how you got into AI yourself.
Hi everyone, so I'm Vic Lee, and my organization is Welcome to Chinatown. We are a community-based organization that is here to bolster small businesses and entrepreneurs in Manhattan, Chinatown, and also foster connections in and across the community. Our vision is to keep Chinatown open for generations to come. This is our space. It's a small business innovation hub. We actually opened a few weeks ago, so there's still some kinks we're working out. The hub is really, it was meant to be a first of its kind gathering place to be able to empower entrepreneurs, build bridges, and champion sustainable growth in the neighborhood. We are a team of 4, so very, very similar and very, very lean team. We're also one of New York State's 26 Entrepreneurs Assistance Center, so we've taken in a lot of constituents to be able to support them and at any growth of where they are in their entrepreneur journey. Particularly, we work with older business owners that may need some more handholding and how we approach digitalization, marketing efforts, pathways to revenue. But then we'll also work with younger entrepreneurs that are across different industries that may not have brick and mortar. Because our team is really small and we're kind of tackling a wide range of activities, I'm really interested in exploring how I can use AI to be more efficient, more effective without growing our headcount, because in particular, we're a startup essentially. So I have to be really cautious about where our budget is. And then on a personal level, so I have a really hard time focusing. I have ADHD, plus I think in general with phone usage, social media, I'm noticing it takes me 3x the amount of time to just start something, just write something. So I've been thinking about how I use AI to be able to how I can use AI to help facilitate and just get me to execute quicker.
All right, thank you both. Thank you all. I'm excited to hear a little bit more about specific instances where you've gone a little deeper in your experience with AI. So Cesar, you told us a little bit about your experience diving into this course, learning about all the potential opportunities. But from our conversations before today, I've understood that you realized, hey, how is our organization going to have a stance, a policy on how do we use this in a way that we all agree is fair and right? So tell us a little bit about your initial thinking and what that process looked like for you.
It's a great question. When I first came back to the fund, one of the questions I asked, how can we incorporate this in a way that we're looking, okay, so we have all our departments in the same space, right? HR, back office, operations, they're all there, and it would be great for them to use AI, but then if there are no guardrails, if we're not pointing them in the right direction, then ultimately we also don't know what we're doing if we don't have an AI policy. So going back to what I said about the for-profit sector, I said, let's look at the AI policy that they have. So that's where I use ChatGPT and I basically asked, can you share some examples, give me some links of what it looks like, right? Now, we had some interns at the time, so this was a project that we collaborated on. One of the things that I thought about as well is let's bridge that gap. They're younger. They know how to use technology probably something better than I do, right? So let's use them, let's leverage them, and then let's use what we know, right? And I guess we'll go over the prompt that we have there. And then that's when, once I knew what the for-profit sector was doing, because they were using it the most in comparison to us, Then I said, okay, then now let's look at what nonprofits are doing. And then how do we create a policy around that that's basically serving 90 plus organizations, right? Because we're leading by example. So right now, right, we don't have necessarily an AI policy that we have presented to our partner projects, but we're in the works of that, but we're actually testing it at the moment. So you want me to go over?
Yeah, I'll build off that to say that what I think is really interesting about this story is you recognize that there needed to be some guardrails, as you said. And the first place you went to figure out what the guardrails would be was ChatGPT. So Cesar, literally break down for us exactly what you did to get ChatGPT to help you. I'll zoom in a little bit so it's easier for our guests to see, and I'll scroll down a little bit. You can walk us through a bit of that conversation you just alluded to.
Sounds good, thank you. Okay, so when you use ChatGPT, and one of the things that we learned in prompt engineering is that you gotta tell it what it is it that you want, and then what are the limitations? What is it that you don't want it to give you, right? So if you look at the prompt, you're seeing you're a consultant trying to understand AI policies across sectors, right? I'm a consultant in that sense. Provide a list of AI policies that for-profit organizations are using. Please provide links to their AI policies, which can be found on their websites. Limit your search to organizations in the US, right? I don't want anything, outside of the US. So it gave me all of this, right? So I searched 6 different sites, right? It gave me some links, and this is what I used to say, this is what it's presenting to me, right? Which organizations are using it, so we already know, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, Facebook, Anthropic, right? I was like, okay, I know all of these organizations, they're all using AI, okay. So then it basically gives you a description of what it looks like, and then it gives you a summary of what that is, right? So defining AI objectives and stakeholders, draft core policies, implement transparency measures, and then conduct training and assessments, right? So now that I understood how for-profits were using it, right, we went on to the next step. So usually I say great, good, or just like a thumbs up. What that does, it basically keeps it into memory and it tells it what is good, what is not. If you don't prompt it that way, it will then spit out different information later on. So you want to have a full conversation as if you're talking to a person, right, in a way. So then I said, great, provide me with a sample AI policy for nonprofits, keep it general. I just wanted the bones, the bare bones. I just wanted to know what are the concerns around this, right? And this is what we're seeing in the nonprofit sector. Privacy, right? Transparency, fairness and bias mitigation, accountability, right? Governance and continuous improvement. And so that gave me, right, the conclusion. Now, if we were to compare the nonprofit sector with the for-profit, it looks different, right? There's something. So now, what I did later on, and we don't have it here, is that I then asked it to draft different AI policies for a nonprofit organization in education, in workforce development, recording law of youth, because these are the areas that I know. And if I know them, I can then speak to it, right? So it gave me something different, similar along the lines, but eventually we see that there is some cross collaboration amongst those. And that's how we got to an AI policy. We're at the stage now where we give it to our chief operating officer. And so she is now working with our legal team to ensure that this policy kind of fits the organization. And the next step after that, we actually have a group of, different, at least 1 or 2 people from each department. And so we're going to be using ChatGPT teams, right? The advantage is that you have an owner of ChatGPT teams that gets to see exactly how you're using ChatGPT, and that's a chief operating officer. And then I'm the administrator, so I'm the one that kind of gives out the different licenses. And so we're going to be meeting monthly. We're going to be talking about what does it look like, what are the pros, the cons, what works for some departments, what doesn't. So eventually what we're seeing is that we're being intentional about how we're using it. And then once we can say, okay, we have something that of substance, we can then pass it on to our partner organizations. So that's the experience with the AI policy.
I appreciate you sharing. I think it's really nice to hear that a foundation is thinking first about how they're going to consider how to use AI. And you have an organization that has the scale to be able to really not only need, but take the time and have the legal capacity to support adopting a meaningful AI policy. And I'm really excited that you all are already thinking ahead about how could your grantee organizations and other partners, who I imagine learn from you all in a variety of ways, can find ways to adopt their own use of AI with the support of your organization. So I appreciate you sharing. Let's jump to another experience. I'll go over to Vic this time. Vic, I know that this space in and of itself just underwent a huge renovation thanks to a big capital campaign that you've been running for the past 2 years, I believe. And I know that a big part of that was grant writing for your own organization, but you mentioned how your organization supports small businesses here in Chinatown. And so I've understood that you all have even been exploring how you can support small businesses here apply for their own business grants. And so I'm excited to hear a little bit more about what are some of the ways that you've started to be able to do that more efficiently. So tell us a little bit about your experience with where did you start, where was your head at, and what have you been doing recently?
So for I'll preface it for grant writing, we do still have a grant writer that is part-time, is a like fractional staff for us. How I've kind of been approaching and segmenting it out is for the grant writer that we have, who works with our development manager, she's working on the more established grants, like more established type of like programming that there's kind of already been like this like proof of concept. She deeply understands kind of like that area of work. When it comes to where I've been using AI for grant writing, at least on the Welcome to Chinatown, like our strategy operation side, is thinking about how do I like formulate kind of like the newer programming pipeline that I'm kind of just like struggling to put to paper, and then help me to like craft that narrative to be able to go after like some of these grant opportunities. So this is one of the examples that Jamie's pulled up. This was this is an example. I put into ChatGPT, I'm interested in this grant opportunity, and I pulled the grant file there, and it's actually like the grant file itself, I think was like over 35 pages of like guidelines and requirements. I asked it to like, please summarize the critical guidelines within this grant opportunity and provide me with 5 bullet points about why this grant is applicable to Welcome to Chinatown, and give me 3 bullet points where we may have a challenge winning this grant. So here for ChatGPT, and I've also been working in this instance, kind of been like training it, putting in like some of the direction in which we want to go into. So it does have that baseline. So it pulls out, right? Like this is the funding opportunity that's important that you should keep in mind. This is the eligibility that's there. What are the program goals that should emphasize, which is in this grant, it's specifically calling out we should be working with economically disadvantaged individuals, minorities, women, et cetera. Helping me to pull opportunities then about why this grant is applicable to Welcome to Chinatown, and I'm using these points as like, okay, if I'm drafting the grant response, this is what I should be focusing on and what to hit upon, because you only have so many words and characters that you can use to like make your case. And then the last are the potential challenges. So here, just putting in there, like, how do I get ahead of this? How do I get ahead of like addressing this in that grant to use that to be able to like formulate my narrative. So this is an example of like how we're using this to help with grant writing. On the small business side, which is not being shown, we've been helping small businesses apply for grants because for small businesses, I mean, one of the challenges is very much cultural. How when you telling a business, asking them, tell me about your story, tell me about yourself. So hard for business owners they're often humble and don't want to kind of like expand on that narrative. So what we've been able to do is interview them, be able to put that into ChatGPT to formulate like the grant narrative. But in addition, one of the things that we've been exploring is help like on the prompt, help me like analyze the business's Google and like Yelp pages and reviews. What are the strengths of the business? What are the challenges that the business have that are opportunities to incorporate that into the narrative? So it also allows us to make this scalable where we're able to help to train volunteers to help with that grant writing assistance. Because if I was doing this, I probably only help maybe like a business 1 or 2 businesses in a week. We're able to like turn this out, where in the most recent instance, we were able to help like 4 to 5 businesses in 1 week do grant writing. So just to kind of give you an idea of like how we're using this in like thought starters, kind of scraping information that is, you know, available to us, and craft the narrative, and then be able to be more effective in our work.
That's amazing. I appreciate the story. I have a quick follow-up question for you. I'm curious, when we see this example, it's really meaningful in giving you a starting point of how to sort your thinking. I imagine you might approach other different types of prompts with different ways of helping you think through a grant process. Well, was it always this good your first time, or how did you get to a point where it really started responding in a way that you wanted it to? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was like trash the first time that I was doing it. I mean, very much the prompts are important. The other is like, what information are you giving so that it knows that for Welcome to Chinatown, to highlight like, yes, the audience that we support are minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, that it makes up, right? Like right now, last year was like 60% of our grantees were women-owned. That's the information that I'm giving it to help to be able to improve the responses. The other are for successful grants that I have that we've been able to win. I am also putting that in there to let it know like this is a narrative I'd like to like continue to build off of. So that part of training and kind of like being able to have that like conversation, positive prompts is extremely helpful.
I think one thing that I've heard from all 3 of our panelists in previous conversations is one little thing that we're doing naturally is that we're using the same actual chat within the ChatGPT app or whichever platform you're using, or at least reminding it to commit certain parts to its memory so that it's really understanding and working for and with us, rather than constantly going back to that starting point of it just shooting in the dark with how it approaches its response. And I think that all of us doing that in different contexts multiple times, many of the responses weren't very good, finally got us to a place where we were like, actually, that's something I can use there.
And just one point I want to add to you about when I'm putting this information, like the criteria, the guidelines, I am also going back into the tool to say, please highlight to me like what page is this on? What page did this kind of come from? So that I can go back in and like cross-reference. I'm not taking this information as always like be all end all.
And you don't just have it draft and submit, I assume, right? Always back to checking for those hallucinations, make sure it's not making stuff up, and also making it ultimately your own. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. It's a really great example. So I'm excited for another one. Zach, I will to start actually. We were talking a bit about the stat at the beginning where supposedly nonprofits are adopting AI more than others, but it makes me wonder, and Zach and I started talking about what type of nonprofit is the ones using it versus which ones haven't had the opportunity, and what are some of the reasons behind that. So I'd love to hear from you as a representative of a smaller organization that's been seeing what works, but also knowing that you had to start on your own.
Yeah, so when I saw that, I think it was specific on communication was the area that nonprofits were using it more. And you know, my first thought when I heard that is that's probably because our teams are way smaller and we feel the need to utilize whatever tools we can to make our work a lot more efficient. When I was tinkering around with ChatGPT, it was because I was just looking for ways to improve efficiencies in my organization. I couldn't hand it off to another person to help me with it because that person doesn't exist. You know, we're a really small team. So when I was thinking about ways to improve my own efficiencies, I was just thinking, what do I dislike doing the most? What causes me the most time that I feel like I could, if I wanted to, could eliminate from my day-to-day work? And so one of the things that takes the longest is prospect researching, if you want to pull up that slide. So yeah, I listed out that I'm a talented fundraiser, you know, for a nonprofit, and I had already put in a proposal that we had put in so it understood our organization a little bit. And, I'm just telling you that what it's trying to do. You're doing prospect research on foundations that fund early childhood education. I asked it to create a spreadsheet that shows the name, the size of the grant, the due dates, the funding priorities, the type of grant, and please link to the submission portal. And then I said, link 15 foundations that fund that New York City area. Now, this is stuff that I could do in GuideStar or Foundation Center myself, but I have to do each one individually. And I have to pull that information and plot them into the spreadsheet. What this does is it just spits out a spreadsheet that I can download. And, I've done this kind of research before and I understood, oh, we get funding from this organization, that's definitely true. And it was a really helpful, starting point for me to then think about more work. And having this spit out a spreadsheet rather than having just a list of links is just a lot easier. And this is something that, newer employees to our organization who might not know the organization quite as well can really use as a starting point. I started with prospect research because I didn't want to first utilize AI in any outward facing work that we were doing. As nonprofits, we really hold sacred the voices that we are representing when we are speaking. So I was making sure that the first use case I knew was something that was totally fine. This is just helping me do prospect research. And I think that when you're utilizing AI, you really understand intrinsically what feels right to use and what might not sit well. I am very transparent with my boss about when I'm using it. This is not something that you should hide or be secretive about. And it should be very open about how it can be a tool rather than a solution. I think we've all kind of mentioned that. And then, the other thing that I know that you do, because I've been on Zoom meetings with you, is you record the meeting and have a physical file of the Zoom, but you also have a note taker, an AI note taker that summarizes the meeting. And that is just a helpful resource you can check and see, yep, oh, what was Zach talking about at minute 30? And you could go back and listen to the conversation, but you could just have the bot summarize it and you remember it, so it's not replacing anything, but it's just an added, tool and a benefit to day-to-day work.
I love these examples, and you're in a very small team, and you may not have had the time or capacity to develop a full-on policy, but you decided to dive in.
Using Cesar's.
Perfect. But I appreciate too that you leaned into your instinct with what you felt was right and comfortable versus what felt weird and creepy. And I'm curious because a lot of us here are part of the Leadership Fellows community. And so we work for organizations that are focused on their community members, and we want to be really considerate of their perspectives and privacy, et cetera. Do you have any quick advice for, how do you reconcile that with small teams and sensitive community conversations?
Yeah, I think the core thing is that you understand when something crosses a line. I don't know how many people saw the Google Gemini ad during the Olympics about the parent helping a daughter write a letter to an Olympian, and it just felt odd. It's like, why do we need AI for that use case? This should be about, the child expressing itself. It doesn't need, an AI to improve that. And I think we all just understood that just didn't feel right. And I would never use this to create a story of a family that our organization serves, or create an image, representing a family that we serve. That doesn't, it just doesn't sit right with me. And being transparent with your internal team, and then transparent on any outward facing work that is done using AI is the most important thing. So this is not something to be ashamed of using, because when you're using it in a ethical and moral way, it is a very helpful business tool.
Cool. This is amazing. We are going to, in a moment, wrap up with our online community, and we'll switch gears in just a few minutes to having some opportunities to practice. We want to just open the floor for at least 1-2 questions quickly, if anybody has any questions for our panelists. I see 2 quick hands, and then we're gonna have more time to talk to a few of the panelists in the breakout time too. I saw your hand first, I'll let you jump in.
No, I'm fine, thank you. Janeda, my question is, are you, or have you used ChatGPT 3, or are you using 4? Like, how, how progressive are you using ChatGPT?
I'll just reshare that so everyone can hear. Essentially, you're asking which model of ChatGPT are the various panelists using. And I think also built into that is the free one is an older version versus if you're paying for the pro version, you're getting some of the latest version. So that is a great question. What are each of you all using and what's your experience been?
We're using 4. ChatGPT Teams, you pay for it on a monthly basis or yearly. And then you can assign as many accounts. And so each month we're paying $30 per account. And then yeah, that's what we do. And if you think about it, yes, the free version is great, but ultimately you're not gonna get the most out of it. And if you want to learn about ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, you should invest in it. I was paying for mine from my own pocket initially, but then once they said, okay, we're opening it to the organization, then I took a chance on it. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm also using 4. As we're so small, we just have 1 account, so having a small monthly fee as a business expense was kind of a no-brainer for us.
I'm also using 4, or maybe, I don't know, the voice, if that's like 4, maybe 4.1 or. Oh, it's full 4, yeah, and then just been trying the voice feature too. Example, I used it this morning, as I was getting ready for a meeting. I was like, pretend you're my executive assistant, please help me, like, I have a meeting with this person, please help me prepare a brief about their background, their like policies, et cetera, criticisms, et cetera, and I was able to like get ready and have a conversation back and forth, to kind of just like save time.
That's really cool. One of the new features of the paid version allows you to have a conversation via voice that you can actually interrupt it, it'll understand mistakes and those kind of elements. But I will just add, building off what your question was asking, ChatGPT, if you go to chatgpt.com, you can begin chatting with it immediately. And so there's gonna be no memory for you to go back to. So even if you don't wanna pay for, you don't have the resources yet to pay for the paid account, I might still encourage you to sign up for the free account so that you can at least have your conversation history and it will start to learn more about who you are and what you're interested in talking to it about as a starting place before you invest money. Let's take one more quick question and then we'll again save some time for questions after the online group, please. Michael.
Jamie, can you share with us what will be available, like the website and
Absolutely.
all this?
Absolutely. That's a great segue, in fact. So if you go to nonprofitai.net, all the resources from our breakout groups in a few minutes will be available there. We'll also have some various opportunities to continue the conversation. So for those of us that are watching online, or for those of you that are here tonight and might work in one small group but decide you want to participate in another, we're gonna have a part 2 session online in a month from today, where we do some more of the practice activities that we'll do this evening, everything from starter conversation prompts to digging deeper with data analysis to more advanced prompt engineering. So it's an opportunity for those of us online as well as in the room to continue. And before we do wrap up and transition into logistics for the breakouts, I wanted to say a few quick thank yous. First of all, I'd love to give a round of applause to our 3 panelists. Hopefully you all continue to the crew up here this evening, either pull them aside or join their small group in a few minutes to hear a little more about their point of view, as well as just tactically, what are they typing in, how are they getting to this place? Because that's what we hope you leave with, is seeing that it is possible after some iteration to get what you want. I've got a double shout out Vic and the team here at Welcome to Chinatown, especially Jeff in the back who's helping with logistics. This is a beautiful space and they're kind enough to let us use it for free, so thank you. I encourage you all to follow Welcome to Chinatown on Instagram because they do some really cool work in the community and they also host awesome fun things to do throughout the year in the neighborhood. I'll also give a shout out to my friend Brandon, as well as my intern from my alma mater, who's watching online from Tennessee. His name's Alex, and he did a ton of work in thinking through a lot of trying this stuff. And as somebody else mentioned up here, the younger people definitely are down to just figure it out and understand it way better than we do from the onset. So thank you, Alex and Brandon. And last but not least, I want to say thank you to Michael, Shell, and Janae for letting me be part of this. This has been really fun. And yes, thank you all. It's been great. Thank you. All right, we'll say goodnight to the people online and encourage them to join us in a month from today. For those of you here this evening, what we're going to do is break into these groups that you see on the screen. I'll just give a quick explanation of what the opportunities are. Just as an asterisk, if you're really like, I want to go to more than one, feel free to quietly, regroup to another one or come to the online version in a few weeks. So group one is if you're just getting started and you don't have an account with any of the large language models, we'll help you get one set up and started.